Today's tale is not about riches, power, or salvation. It is about mathematics. In medieval Yorkshire, a most serious problem arose: how to evenly distribute one fart among 12 greedy friars. With both sound and smell accounted for, the solution, I assure you, is enlightening. The summoner was quivering like a leaf in a gale. He gripped the high pommel of his saddle with white knuckles, absolutely vibrating with rage. He had been forced to sit there and listen to the friar spin a nasty little fable about a summoner, and he looked ready to burst out of his skin. His face had turned a shade of crimson usually reserved for glowing embers, and finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He stood high in his stirrups, looming over his horse. "Lordings," he said, sweeping his gaze across our company, "I ask for just one thing. You heard this friar slander my profession with his lies. Now, courtesy demands you let me tell my tale in return. This man claims he has some inside knowledge of hell. Well, God knows that is hardly a surprise. Friars and fiends have always been the best of neighbors. You have likely heard the old story about the friar who was granted a vision of the underworld. An angel guided him down into the deep, showing him the torment and the fire. But the friar looked around with a puzzled expression. He saw plenty of souls in agony, but not a single member of his own order. So he turned to the angel and asked, 'Is it possible? Do friars possess such special grace that not one of us is ever damned to this terrible pit?' The angel gave him a long, dry look. 'Oh no,' he said. 'There are millions of you down here.' Then the angel led him straight to Satan himself. The devil lay there, massive and dark, with a tail broader than the mainsail of a galleon. The angel shouted over the roar of the flames, 'Lift up your tail, Satan. Show us your backside. Let this man see where the friars nest.' And just like angry bees swarming from a hive, 20,000 friars came rushing out of the devil's rear end. They buzzed all over the caverns of hell, terrified and chaotic, and then, just as quickly, they scrambled back inside their warm little home. Satan clapped his tail down with a thunderous thud, and all was quiet again. So you see, that is where friars come from. That is their true heritage. But enough of that. Let me tell you what actually happened. There was once a marshy district in Yorkshire called Holderness. A certain friar went about this damp country, preaching and begging. That was his trade, you see. He would stand in the pulpit, working the villagers into a frenzy, urging them to purchase masses for the dead. He promised that for a few coins, he could pull souls out of purgatory as easily as pulling a cork from a bottle. "Hurry!" he would cry. "Pay up, for Christ's sake, or your grandmothers will be clawed with meat hooks and baked in the fires." But the moment he stepped out of the church, the holy act vanished. He became a man of business. He walked from door to door with his staff and his begging sack, peering into every cottage like a hungry hawk. He begged for meal, cheese, corn, or even a scrap of an old blanket. He traveled with a companion, a servant who carried a horn-tipped staff and a set of ivory writing tablets. Whenever a generous soul gave them something, a bushel of wheat, a cake, or a heavy slab of bacon, the companion would whip out the ivory tablet with a flourish. He would write down the names of the donors right there in front of them, promising that the brothers would pray for them night and day. But the second they walked out the door and turned the corner, the friar would wipe the tablet clean with a wet cloth. He erased every single name. He served them nothing but fairy tales and empty air. Now this friar went house to house until he arrived at the home of a local man named Thomas. Thomas was usually a generous soul, but today he was in a foul mood. He was sick, bedridden, and lying low on a couch under a pile of blankets. The friar breezed right in. "God be here," he announced in a voice smooth as butter. He walked over to the sick man. "Oh, Thomas, my dear friend, I have been praying for you so diligently. I have worn out the wood of this bench with my knees." And then, with the casual arrogance of a cat, the friar shooed the family pet off the bench, laid down his staff and hat, and settled his own backside into the most comfortable spot in the room. Thomas groaned from under the covers. "Master, how have you been? I haven't seen you in a fortnight." The friar let out a dramatic sigh. He explained that he had been working terribly hard, praying for Thomas's salvation. He claimed he had just come from the church where he preached a sermon, not a complicated scriptural one, mind you, but a simple lecture teaching people to be charitable and, more importantly, to give their money to the church. Just then, Thomas's wife bustled in from the yard. The friar jumped up like a spring lamb. He hugged her, clinging a little longer than was strictly necessary, and kissed her. He chirped and preened like a sparrow in mating season, telling her she was the most beautiful woman he had seen in the congregation that morning. The wife was polite, but she looked exhausted. She told the friar that Thomas was impossible. "He is as angry as a stepped-on ant," she said. "Nothing pleases him. I try to keep him warm and comfortable, but he just grunts and groans like a boar in a sty." The friar shook his head solemnly. He looked at the sick man and tutted. "Thomas, Thomas, this is the devil's work. You must purge this anger from your heart. Wrath is a terrible sin." The wife, eager to change the subject, asked the friar if he would like some dinner. "Oh, barely a morsel," the friar said, trying to look fragile. "My digestion is so delicate. Perhaps just the liver of a capon and a thin slice of soft bread. And maybe a roasted pig's head, but really I eat very little. My spirit is nourished by the Bible, so my body requires almost nothing." While the wife went to prepare this modest feast, the friar turned his attention back to the sick man. He began to weave a tale about a vision he'd had. He claimed he saw Thomas's child, who had died recently, entering the gates of heaven. He said the other friars saw it too. He used this lie to prove how holy his order was, comparing himself to the prophets Elijah and Aaron, fasting and praying in poverty, unlike those fat, wealthy monks in the monasteries. He leaned in close, his breath hot near the sick man's face. "Thomas," he whispered, "if you want to recover, you must pay me to pray for you. Your mistake is that you scatter your donations. You give a penny to this friar, a penny to that one. It doesn't work. You need to give it all to me. A farthing isn't worth much if you split it into 12 pieces." Thomas was getting annoyed. He was lying there in pain, and this man was lecturing him while fishing for gold. But the friar wouldn't stop. He launched into a massive, droning sermon about the dangers of anger. He told long, winding stories about ancient history. He talked about King Cambyses, a drunkard and a tyrant who shot a knight's son through the heart just to prove his hand was steady. He rambled on about King Cyrus, who destroyed an entire river because his horse drowned in it. He looked at sick, miserable Thomas and said, "Abandon your anger, brother. Give me your confession, and give me gold to build our cloister. We are still paying for the foundation stones. And we haven't even finished the roof. Thomas had had enough. The devil of anger had truly taken root in his heart now. He looked at the friar with narrowed eyes. "Listen," Thomas rasped. "I do have something for you, but you have to promise me one thing." "Anything," the friar said, eyes lighting up, thinking a bag of silver was imminent. "I have a gift," Thomas said. "It is hidden right here underneath me. But you must swear on your profession that you will divide it equally among all the friars in your convent. Every single brother must get an equal share." The friar was thrilled. He grabbed Thomas's hand and shook it vigorously. "I swear it, I swear on my faith." "Good," Thomas said. "Reach your hand down behind my back. Grope around near my backside. I have it hidden there for safety." The friar was greedy, and greed makes a man foolish. He assumed there was a purse of coins tucked in the sheets. He slid his hand down, reaching under the sick man, searching blindly in the dark warmth, until his hand was right at the cleft of the man's buttocks. Thomas waited until the hand was perfectly positioned. Then he gathered all his strength, clenched his muscles, and let out a fart. It was a monstrous thing, louder than a cart horse dragging a wagon through deep mud. The friar jerked his hand back, as if he'd touched a hot coal. He was absolutely furious. He leaped up like a startled lion. "You false churl!" he screamed. "You did that on purpose. You will pay for this insult." The servants heard the shouting and came running in. Seeing the rage on the friar's face, they chased him out of the house to prevent a brawl. He stormed away down the road, grinding his teeth in fury. He ran straight to the manor house of the lord of the village. He burst in while the lord was sitting at dinner. The lord looked up, surprised to see his confessor looking like he'd been dragged through a hedge backward. "What is it, Master John?" the lord asked. "You look like you've been chasing thieves." "I have been insulted," the friar shouted, trembling. "Down in the village, that sick peasant Thomas, he blasphemed against my whole convent." The lord calmed him down and asked for the details. The friar, still sputtering, explained the situation, how he had been promised a gift to share equally with his 12 brethren, and how that gift turned out to be a massive expulsion of wind. The lady of the house heard this and simply said, "Well, he is a sick man. Clearly he has lost his wits." But the lord sat there, staring into his wine cup, deep in thought. He wasn't angry. He was intellectually puzzled. He started muttering to himself. How did that churl come up with such a complex problem? To divide a sound equally among 12 men. That is an impossible arithmetic problem. A sound is just a reverberation of air. It fades away. You can't slice it like a loaf of bread. The lord's squire, a clever young man named Jenkin, was carving the meat nearby. He heard the lord puzzling over the physics of the problem and suppressed a grin. "My lord," Jenkin said, stepping forward, "if you grant me a piece of fine cloth for a new gown, I can tell you exactly how to solve this riddle." The lord nodded. "Tell me, Jenkin." "It is simple physics," Jenkin said. "On a day when the air is perfectly still, bring a cartwheel into the hall. A cartwheel has 12 spokes. You bring 12 friars from the convent and have them lay their noses right at the end of each spoke." The friar's eyes went wide with horror. Jenkin continued, gesturing with his carving knife. "Then you place this noble friar right at the center, at the hub of the wheel. And you bring the old man Thomas and set him on the hub as well. When he releases the gift, the sound and the scent will travel down the spokes equally to every friar. And since this friar here is the worthiest of the bunch, he gets the first blast right at the center. The whole room erupted. The lord laughed until he cried, the lady laughed, and the servants howled. Everyone laughed except the friar. They all agreed that Jenkin the squire had solved the impossible math problem with as much brilliance as Euclid himself. And that is my tale. The friar got his lesson. The squire got a new gown, and we have had our laugh. So we see that sometimes the sharpest weapon in a conflict isn't a sword but a quick wit, and perhaps a very specific understanding of physics. Jenkin proved that even the most impossible problems can be solved if you approach them from the right angle. If you appreciated the squire's brilliance in dividing the indivisible, please leave a like on this video. And to ensure you don't miss our next lesson in medieval cunning and human nature, make sure you hit that subscribe button.